Right, we're just coming up to the top of the hour, and so we're going to be starting today's webinar. The topic is 7 ideas to improve your outbound dialing. And delighted to be joined by 2 well-respected individuals. Stuart Pearce. Stuart is with PRG Solutions, which is a consulting company based in the Western
in Bristol, yes.
Bristol. And Stuart's probably best known for being the author of the Telesales Handbook, which he wrote 4 years ago.
Yeah, about 4 years ago.
4 years ago. We're also delighted to be joined by Darren Sullivan. It's the first webinar Darren's attended with us. And Darren is the COO of Ultra Communications, which is best known as a cloud-based dialer platforms, but you do a lot of other things other than just outbound.
We certainly do. A lot of inbound as well. Thanks for inviting us.
Indeed. And Darren's going to be taking us through 3 technology ideas to improve outbound. So let's have a look at some housekeeping. If you're not already, if you'd like to dial into the chat room, which is callcenterhelper.com/chat. You can leave tips. You can also leave questions from the audience in the chat room, and we have a bottle of champagne for the best tip or the best answer that comes through later on. We'll be picking that immediately after the webinar, and we'll be announcing the results on Twitter, so probably about 2:30. A replay is available later on today. That's the same link as you've dialed into today. As I mentioned before, we've got the chat room, a few simple rules, no commercial messages, web addresses or emails only, and please keep it nice and polite as you always do. And then once you're logged into the chat room, the web address here, callcenterhelper.com/chat, you can then go and download the webinar slides, little link on the top right-hand side, and you can download the chat room. So once you're logged into the chat room, we've now got a good number of people logged in. I'd like to ask you in the audience, in 1 or 2 words, could you describe what you use outbound dialing for? Is it for instance, telesales, collections, appointments, proactive customer service? If you'd just like to pop the answers in, and Matthew says collections, Sarah says telesales, Anna telesales, Tanya is telemarketing. We've got a proactive customer service from Jimmy. Telesales and collections says TJ. Mark, customer satisfaction surveys. That's an interesting one there. Telesales, as Joe, Marius, telesales collections, Mark, sales and feedback, collections, telemarketing and collections, customer care and collections, says Chris, collections and CSAT, says Mark. I think collections seems to be a sort of a common one here. Telemarketing, outbound sales, telesales collections, acquisitions for retail store cards. So I guess that's sort of almost a bit like telemarketing, I guess. Outbound campaigns, customer notifications, particularly if an account needs attention. So I guess that's sort of proactive finance, I would imagine. Telesales surveys, collections, telesales, telemarketing, cold and warm telesales for new fare acquisition and reactivation. So that's probably quite a representative view of the outbound industry.
It's certainly across the board, isn't it?
Yeah, probably a few more collections than I'd probably expect in there, but I guess that's a function of a lot of telesales now, is that you have to follow up on people afterwards. So I'd just like to just do a quick poll to have a drill down into the audience, and what I'd like to do is ask you the question, which is what percentage of contacts you have are outbound calls. So if you'd just like to vote on that. That's in a different box, and the answers to that are 0 to 9%, 10 to 24%, 25 to 49%, 50 to 74%, and 75 to 100%. So if you'd just like to vote on that now, and Darren, would you expect, based on the audience, where would you expect outbound to come in that percentage from what people are saying?
That's the one that I think is a bit difficult for me to answer. contacts could easily be including mail, email, inbound calls. So I feel comfortable about taking a guess, but I would say the 50 to 74.
50 to 74. Well, let's have a look at the different answers there. So let's just share the results up on the screen. And certainly there's quite a large percentage have got quite a lot of outbound, but probably the most popular answer there is in the 10 to 24. I guess that probably fits into probably proactive customer service would probably fit into that page overall. So quite a range there. So only 14% of the audience are under 9%. So I think we've got some very big population of outbound users on the call. Right, let's have a look down through the, just hide that poll, and we'll have go on to the first of our speakers today, which is Stuart Pearce from PRG Solutions. And Stuart is going to take us through the first of your ideas. There's two ideas on how our audience can improve their outbound dialing and particularly their telesales.
Well, I'm going to try to, certainly. Thank you, Jonty. Good morning. As John said, my name is Stuart Pearce. I'm the director at PRG Solutions, and I am, as he's mentioned a couple of times, author of the Telesales Handbook. What I'm going to endeavour to do today, over these sort of 4 ideas or tips, whatever you call them, is to give a bit of an insight into sort of how you can get the best out of making those calls. So, first things first. First idea: your voice when you're on the telephone. That is the tool of your trade. That's the thing you're going to use the most. Okay. So your first impressions always count. The voice is the first thing they're going to hear. So you need to be polite, you need to be cheery, you need to be professional. You want to get across that you're a nice person to want to speak to, or a conversation they're going to enjoy. Once you've done that, you want to communicate with your customer. You don't want to just fire off your pitch and keep your fingers crossed. You want to actually talk with your customer, get some response from them. Build the rapport. We've all heard that word before. You need to look at sort of what they want to get from this call. We all know what you want from the call. You want that sale or that booking. But you need to look at what your customer wants from that call. Look at their sort of their needs, their wants, their desires, and build up towards those. Needs is your basic point. You need to build up desires. So you've worked out what they want at this call, and you can hopefully give them that through your benefits in your service, etc. Body language is another one. There's an ongoing argument about that with body language and working on the phone. But you'd also look at things like, if you slouch in your chair, when you're talking on the phone, you may be going to come across quite so clearly. We've done things in the past, and John and I were talking about it earlier, where to keep people's heads up, we'll put a picture of someone they like or their kids, and get them to talk at the picture so their heads up, so nice and clear. So you're not slouching when you're talking, and you come across them clearly. You've got to remember, people are going to get several calls a day. You've got to sort of stand out and be that nice call they want to listen to again. With that in mind, you've got to look at sort of your pitch, your pace, your tone, how you're coming across. You want to be clear. You've got a nice pitch. You want to make it a call that people want to listen to, a conversation they want to have. We get lots of phone calls. Nobody wants to speak to somebody who sounds depressed or fed up or doesn't want to be doing the call. We've all had those calls that just before EastEnders starts. You get a nice depressed phone call. No one wants to talk to that. They're going to get 20 calls a day from 2 people on something. So you need to stand out a bit, and that means being nice and clear, precise, and said, a nice voice. It's the tool of your trade. The volume and energy are always a funny one. You want to sound passionate about what you're doing, but you don't want to overdo it. Too much volume and they're holding the phone back from their ear. Not enough, and they're straining to listen, and therefore will switch off and do something else. Energy is another one. It's a difficult one to get right if you're not careful. You want to be energetic about what you're promoting and talk about, you're trying to talk to them about, but again, you don't want to be over the top. If you go a bit over the top, you sound like you had helium for breakfast, and again, they'll switch off. They won't want to listen to that conversation.
So do you adjust the loudness, the sort of loudness and pace of the other person you're speaking to as well?
You can do, but you've got to remember as well that very often you'll be on a headset, so you've got a tiny little microphone by your mouth, and they've got a little earpiece. So you need to be, by volume, I mean make it clear for them. So loud enough that they can hear what you're saying, not actually going, pardon, but not too loud so that they're holding the phone back from their ear. Articulation is another one. It's a funny word, and again, you don't want to overdo that. what I'm saying is you need to be clear. You need to make sure that what you're getting across is coming across clearly, it's understandable, and this customer is kind of completely on tune with what you're trying to talk to them about. Yeah? Listening is a big one. If you listen to your customer and having this nice, clear, precise, cheerful conversation, you listen to them, they'll tell you things you didn't ask for. They'll answer all your questions, give you more information, and allow you to, again, do your job properly and get into that point where you're having that nice conversation with them. Basically, if you put all those in, no one's asking you to kind of change the way you speak. What we're saying is just be clear, precise, professional, stand out from the crowd by the way you conduct yourself on the phone, the way you use your voice. It's the one thing you've got. You can't see what they're doing. Should we get to the web chat again, the Skype on again, yeah. But by being nice and clear and professional, you make it a nice conversation that they've had, and they'll remember it, and they'll want to talk to you again.
And do you find that call recordings and listening to the conversations are particularly good at helping to sort of refine the voice?
From a training point, absolutely. I know I sound awful on the telephone. But it's nice, and it's little tweaks. No one would expect you to change the way you speak because that's not sustainable. But it's those little tweaks just to kind of bring it up and down a bit so you know where you are. And on the telephone, it's about what you say and how you say it. And that's the one thing you've got. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Secondly, I want to quickly talk about sort of KPIs or key performance indicators. We all know what they are. Again, we all hear them. We all know about MR reports, etc. But if you don't measure what you do, one, you can't set the standards for what you're doing, but also if you've not measured it, you're not measuring it, then how do you know when you've got to the end? How do you know you've reached your target or your goal if you've not, don't know where you are now, where you want to be? If you don't measure it, you don't know how far you've got towards that target or the response you want. Too many times I've seen, KPI reports scanned over and then chucked in the back of a folder and never to be seen again. You have to firstly be bothered to read them and also know how to read them and to analyze them and see sort of where your team's performing, who's up, who's down, etc. And then you want to act on those results. By that I don't mean just moan at somebody for not performing or not hitting target. There could well be a reason, which I'll get to in a second. But if you don't keep your reports, you don't read your reports and analyze and act on those results, then you're just wasting paper by printing them off. What it also allows you to do is allow you to understand your team's ability and then use that knowledge for best effect so you can get what you want to be, the targets or your goals for the team and obviously the business in the long run. Excuse me. For example, if you have a KPI report and there's just on the side there, and if you've got one or two people in your team of 10 that aren't quite performing as well as everybody else, there could be any number of reasons for that, but I'll pick on a couple of them. First and foremost,
hi John T. We appear to be having a problem with the sound. It's gone all funny at the moment.
Okay, can you hear us, or is the sound quality a little?
No, you're fine. It was just Stuart was sounding a bit jumbled. Actually, I couldn't understand what he was saying.
Okay, maybe there's a little bit of quality on the broadband line. We'll carry on and see if we can rectify the issue.
Okay, sorry, yes. We lost a bit of technology there for a second. So if you've got one or two on your team that aren't quite performing, it could be a case, say, that the last one you want to see is that one of the teams being lazy and not really pulling their weight. A couple of things can happen there. Obviously, one, they're not performing and you're getting your money's worth, but two, if the rest of the team know that, then they're going to be demotivated as well. It could be that they're sort of spending too much time talking to customers and not really getting to the sort of end result. But again, you'd have to look at their sort of closing rate to see if that was really the issue there. The other would be because they could be sort of struggling with their product knowledge. You could not be a bit nervous and not quite sure what they're talking about, what they're doing, how they're delivering it. It could be the delivery of the pitch. It could be just sort of how they're looking at it and how they're coming across on the phone. All those things can go against it. What that's going to lead to is you to be able to look at whether they need coaching, whether they want training. It could be processes that are falling down in between all that. But remember, these are just people. We're only as good as the things that we're using. So looking at that KPI report on that sheet is going to allow you to look at sort of where any gaps are you need to pick up on. It'll allow you to keep track on what's happening with the team, how they're performing or not performing, as the case may be. You need to keep those sort of results and those figures up to date, so you know you are day to day. But what you can also do is you can actually use those to plan for the future. So you'll know about the sort of peaks and troughs within the business, you know, whether you put more staff on in the summer, et cetera, et cetera. I think that'll do for the second one for the minute.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Stuart. Well, we're going to jump to a poll on that topic, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go across and do top tips and questions. So if you've got a question, if you'd like to hashtag question, if it's a tip, hashtag tip. So Stuart was talking about KPIs. Just like to ask the question of the audience, which KPIs or what KPIs do you rely on most? Perhaps if you could select a maximum of 3 KPIs from the list. The answers are total sales made or revenue per hour, right party contacts, percentage utilization, adherence to the dialer schedule, or average handling time. So if you'd like to put in there, Stuart, I guess that probably right party contacts must be probably up near the top there.
Well, I would agree with that. Yeah, I mean, you know, if you're going to make a lot of calls a day, you want to be speaking to the right people.
Yeah,
first time.
Indeed. Well, let's. I think we've got most people voted there. Just a couple more to come in. Here we are. Just close the results, and we'll share those up on the screen. So, indeed, 69% right party contacts. Second is total sales made or revenue per hour, which is another utilization. 38% average handling time. That's a year ago, 2 years ago, average handling time would have been probably higher than right party contacts down. I've seen that sort of falling off the shelves in recent years.
Yes, certainly. I would have picked one from the top and one from the bottom there. I would have also gone for the sales role and the average handling time. So I'd have been wrong on both counts by the looks of it.
And adherence to dialer schedule is right down the list. I guess we've probably not got many resource planners in the audience because they're often quite concerned with that.
Well, I'd just like to let the dialer get on with it.
Yeah, indeed. So and percentage utilization, that's quite low overall. So it's nice to see we've got some more outcome-based metrics like total sales being driven there. Okay, so what we're going to do is going to now have a look at some of your top tips and questions. And the first tip we've got, Jenny sent in, linked into KPIs. Penetration reports are essential to dialer administration. This will give a clear view of the dialer performance on the contact list as well as the dialer infrastructure. Penetration reports, I'm not familiar with that term, Darren. What does that refer to?
Well, my understanding is that how far through the data that you've progressed and making all the right outcomes that you're expecting. So the penetration report would be a percentage of all the leads that you first uploaded. How far through have you got that list progressed?
Oh, okay, interesting. Well, we've got a couple of questions coming in. Ken says, can you touch on how best to handle the data protection implications of outbound calling? I guess this could be almost a webinar in its own right. Are there any tips that you could share with Ken, Darren?
Well, it is a rather specialist area. If you're manipulating a client's data by calling them, updating it, putting down your records, you must ensure that data doesn't reach the outside world. In terms of the dialer application itself, certainly in cloud dialing, we've taken advice on this, that because we're not actually manipulating the data, we're only holding it. As long as we maintain that it's secure and then it won't reach, and it doesn't reach the outside world, then it's not a data protection issue.
No. In fact, often it's things like Ofcom rules are often more things you have to worry about than
much more so.
The data protection issues, but it is certainly an important one. Right, let's pick up a couple of audience tips. Neris, I think has been on a number of our webinars, saying use the call recordings from your best performers to inspire and pull up any struggling consultants. Certainly, from sales perspective, often your best performers are have got the best knowledge, but don't necessarily want to share that. And I guess a call recording could be an easy way of doing it.
Yeah, you'll find that those that for want of a better word, sell well, do so because that's what they want to do. They're not necessarily ones who want to sort of share that with the world because it's their sales sort of thing, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. If you've got if anybody does a good call that gives a desired result, it's always worth sort of playing that back to the rest of the team. You can always pick up little bits from it.
And Leah said transition time is a key measure. The analogy I use is that moving from call to call is like cornering in F1, Formula One. Too slow and you won't succeed. Too fast and you'll lose traction or focus for accelerating into the next next trait. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, sorry. We've had a customer that has told us that an average wait time between calls, if the call handlers wait more than a certain number of seconds, they lose interest, and if they wait less than a certain number of seconds, they don't really want to partake in the call. They'd like a break.
So I guess that's quite a difficult one to find that balance on. I wonder if Lee has got any guidance for what would be the ideal transition time. Matthew said, let agents assess their calls with QA, quality assurance, get agents to acknowledge their development areas. I think self-scoring is often, or self-listening is quite good, as long as you've got some degree of calibration on that, but we're often our own worst critics. Neris is saying, be intelligent with the way you use your data. Make sure your dialer manager is looking for trends in penetration sales and sort your data in the most optimal way. There are some lovely examples of making significant percentage gains in that. I think, Stuart, you're going to be talking about how you can use the best way to contact people.
Certainly on timings,
in a short while. And we've had a opinion from Shane. Dialer adherence, whilst important from a resource planning perspective, ranks lower than Right Party Connect. I think that's a view shared by the statistics we've got from our audience. So, Stuart, would you like to take us through your next of your thoughts on how to improve outbound operations?
I will certainly try. Excuse me. Okay, so idea number 3, or tip number 3, if you like. Incentives boost performance. An obvious statement, I know. We all like to be rewarded for a job well done, even that's just a pat on the back from the boss. But there's probably a bit more to it than that. Certainly in a sales environment, you're going to want to sort of really get behind your agents or your people on that to make sure you're really going for it. The simple rule of thumb that we always use is make it obtainable. There's no real point in having this fantastic, wonderful, all singing, all dancing incentive if nobody in the team feels they can hit the target you've set for it. That's going to have the adverse effect, and they'll actually switch off from trying to achieve it because they don't feel it's obtainable. It's about understanding the sales mindset, if you like. People are salespeople because that's what they want to do. It's one of the few jobs where you get immediately rewarded for your own efforts. With a lot of sales, but I know certainly when I was on the sales floor, you always wanted to be sort of top of the list, head of the division, the best one on the floor, that kind of stuff. And it's understanding that mindset that helps you set any incentives you're going to put down. Make them attainable, make them realise that they've got to actually push for it a bit. You've also got to make it appeal to the majority. If you've got a team of sort of 10 or 12, there's generally going to be a couple of really good performers, several average performers, and a couple of maybe newbies. If you make your incentive something that just the 2 top guys are going to be able to achieve, as I said before, the rest of the team is going to switch off. They're not going to bother trying, and they're probably going to, have the adverse effect on what you want, which is obviously to boost the team up and get them making more sales.
Just have to click on the screen.
Oh, sorry, I have to manage to break the technology. There we go. The best way to go about that, and getting back to that rule of thumb, is to find out what they like. I remember a while ago looking after a team of sort of early 20-year-old young ladies who never had any money. So for them, the best on-the-spot incentives was food and cigarettes, because they didn't have to buy them. So that worked well for them. If you've got a team of older ages, that's not going to work so well. So it's finding out what they like and what's going to make them want to to perform better and get the incentive. You've got to, as I said, give them what they want to win or to gain, but you've got to obviously make them work for it. It's no point, make a simple explanation. If you want them to get 10 sales, then you ask for 12. So if they get the 12, great, but they're always aiming for that sort of higher amount. You've got to make it worth them going for it. You don't want to give away just for doing their job kind of stuff. This is certainly in the sales environment, you want them to actually work for it. You need to look at short, mid and long-term goals. So obviously your long-term goals are generally your bonus schemes, of a month, that kind of stuff. Mid-term would be this week's target. The short-term would be the stuff for today, or the next hour even. You can really kind of make a great boost to the day's sales or the performance if you go for an on-the-spot, in the next hour, first one to get the next sale or whatever it is. But keep those nice and simple. If a bonus or incentive scheme is hard to understand and they've got to put too much thought into whether they can do it or not, then you're missing the point. If there's more thought going into working out if they can make it and not enough going into actually going for it, you're missing the point of what you're trying to aim here, and you want them to be understanding what they're going for and actually going for it. Yeah. So make those sort of things obtainable for them. Excuse me. Getting to the last sort of tip or idea. John, you touched on it earlier about the timing. It's about sort of picking your moment. When you're phoning customers, you want to pick the right moment. You want to optimize the time that you've got. You've only got a certain amount of hours on the phone, and in any sort of business day, whether you're B2B or B2C, you're going to have quiet spots where you won't get so many contacts. If you've got the first contact, you won't get as many of those. So think about who you're calling is going to be the best way to look at that. Whether you're B2B or B2C, look at what your best times are. When you think you can get the best contacts or the first contact to the right people, look at when those are going to be and plan your day to get those results. So obviously the two main ones are sort of business to business or business to consumer. They're both going to be slightly different in the way you approach your day, excuse me, but they are both going to be the same results if you plan it properly. So if we take B2B, most people come in on Monday morning and start about what they did the weekend and etc., and how tired they are, or whatever else might be. So trying to make your kind of first sales calls on a Monday morning, probably not get many contacts. Everyone's doing the same as you. They're catching up on the weekend with everybody else around them. So have your sales meeting then. Have your meetings, talk about your KPIs targets for this week. Make best use of that time. Again, if you're phoning B2B, most will take a lunch between 1 and 2, so why not give your guys that lunch break? Again, no point then trying to phone people on a lunchtime. Everyone's got a lunch. You want to get the best contact in the hours that you've got. B2C is going to be obviously slightly different. Generally, those tend to start sort of 12:30, 1 o'clock and go on to sort of early evening, but you're going to get the same kind of issues. So, for example, 3 to 3:30 is school run time. 5 to 6 is tea time. 7:30 the soap start. So it's just a case of being aware of that, planning for that, having your agents on the phone when your customers are going to be able to answer, and optimizing the time that you've got to get the most contacts and therefore the most responses and, if you like, the most sales. Excuse me. It's just a plan for making the most of every hour you've got. If you've got a dozen people on the phone and they are all spending an hour a day getting one contact each, that's not your best use of your time.
Is there a cut-off time, do you think, at which in the evening you can't go beyond?
There's an ongoing discussion, shall we say, about that. Depends on your customer, really. I mean, if you are, let's say, a bank phoning your own customers, you can probably go to sort of 8, half 8, maybe even 9 o'clock, because they're your customers and they won't mind that phone call. But if you're other end of the scale and cold calling, you're interrupting their time. So probably want to come back sort of 7:30, 8 o'clock at a push, I would say, if you're going to be calling people out of the blue. You have to remember you're interrupting their day. It works for you, but it may not for them. So you need to kind of plan for that. So I'm saying about optimizing the time you've got and make sure your agency callers are on the phone when they're going to get the best chance of an answer.
Yes. And
having that conversation. Yeah. Excuse me. So pick those times. Look at sort of when you're doing that, and just plan your teams around it. So pick your training sessions and your sales meetings for the times when you're going to get many responses. So that's it for that one. If I just want to quickly summarize sort of all 4 ideas. The first one, use your voice. It's a great tool. On the phone, it's all about what you say and how you say it. Use your voice as best you can, you get the best responses. With the KPIs, measure what you do, read it, analyze it, act in it, and use it to plan for the rest of your week, your month, your year, etc. Use incentives that match your team. Stuff, pick things they're going to want, that they think they can achieve, and they can actually, make the effort to go for. And plan your day around when you're going to get the best responses from your prospective customers, or any customers if you like, and have your team on the phone for those times.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Stuart. Some great food for thought, and we're going to go on and take some questions and tips from the audience. A lot of discussion coming through on the best times to make a call to people. We've had a comment back from Russell, who's responding to Ken, saying if you follow the 8 principles of DPA, Data Protection Act, you'll be fine. I'm not sure what the eight principles are. So Russell, if you could point us in that direction, that would be most useful to see, and we can share that with the audience. A couple of questions on best time to talk. TJ says review your reports to check the BTT, which is best time to talk, and improve utilization and dialing accordingly. So what sort of report would you be able to pull that off? Is that a custom report or is that a standard report?
It would be a pretty standard report.
Yeah, that's useful to see. And Dave 11 has said set up call blending for CLI number left when dialing to increase the contact rate, as outbound calls returned by customers through this channel go to the best skilled advisors, which will improve the KPI figures. I'm not sure I entirely understand that one, that comment there. This is for when you're dialing and they don't answer, do you think, is it? Or?
It's where they've missed the call and they're returning the call based on the CLI you've left.
Oh, okay.
Those calls can be directed, as Dave highlights, to the best advisors. Sometimes those calls aren't wholly productive, but it's an awful lot easier to deal with an inbound call than it is to try and contact the customer again.
And certainly I think where we've seen where people can leave a local phone number or a mobile number often dramatically increases take-up rate compared to a general number.
Yes, and that's all about to change this year as well. For post-sales, you'll only be allowed to deal with a national rate number, and no longer will you be able to use 087, 0845, 44. Yes. Even 0800 is becoming questionable because it's not free from mobiles.
Indeed. So I think we've only got, I think it's about 95 days before that legislation comes in, which is in the middle of June. And in fact, it looks like we found the 8 principles there on the Information Commissioner Office's website, which Rachel has happily posted in there. David has said, again on the best times, what's the best way to build a propensity score in order to identify the best time to dial and get hold of a customer without any information on the demographic of the customer? So I think, have you got any ideas on this? I've got one area.
It's actually a very long subject, but in as close as I can get it, if you've got no information on the customer, the first time you call them, you're gaining information. You know whether they've answered the phone, you know that they're busy, you know whether they've had a wrong party contact, and you can use that information. So actually on the 3rd or 4th time, you've got quite a lot of information to have guided you to have been dialing them at the right time, which is probably just any other time I haven't dialed them so far.
Well, I suppose a good one. I suppose try them in the afternoon if they don't answer. Try them in the evening. Certainly, I was talking with a gentleman from one bank, and he said we found the best time to dial an outbound call is at the time that they first called us. But again, you do need a history to do that. Emma's saying get the agents design how the KPIs are looking. I guess this is agent-led KPIs. The more input they have in the design, the more they are bought into when designing them. So I guess that's more around individual KPIs, which probably fits in with one of your comments, Stuart, about keeping it simple.
Absolutely. I like simple, Jonty, as we discussed earlier. But I would agree as well with them that, you know, if the agents have bought into the standards you're going to set them by, then it goes to run that, yes, of course they're going to be bought into those because they've helped us on them. So absolutely.
Okay. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to jump across to a poll now, and that is: do you blend inbound and outbound calls? So if you'd just like to vote on that in the poll now. The chances are inbound and outbound are kept separate. Some agents are blended and all agents are blended. So just like to vote in there. We'll have a look at how blended the audience is. I imagine, Darren, that there's quite a large majority of the audience would be separate. Let's have a look at the results they've got, and indeed. The most common one is, in fact, only 22% of agents are completely blended. Okay, so I think.
Well, that's a bit disappointing to see, but hopefully we can convince some of our audience to possibly review that in part of my talk through later.
Indeed, that was a little bit of a trick question in the audience because that's one of the topics that Darren's now going to be taking us through in a few minutes. So, Darren, if you'd like to put your presentation up on the screen, hang on, we just need to change this across and change it across to yourself. And then Darren Sullivan from Ultra is going to take us through 3 ways that technology can improve the outbound dialing. So, Darren.
Thanks very much, John-T. As John-T says, I'm Darren Sullivan. I work for Ultra Communications for the last 10 years. And the way that we work with our clients and prospects means that a large part of my role has been to work with contact centers as their outsourced technology consultants. So not everybody we work for is actually a client of Ultra. So I'd like to introduce my first subject by saying that I've seen plenty of contact centers that haven't had any automated dialing equipment, but I've not yet seen a scenario where the technology could not have improved the efficiency of their operation. I've also worked with contact centers who are using automated dialing equipment, but they haven't been getting the results that they've been after. Yet in both cases, there's been a reluctance to change, purely on the basis of the cost of acquisition of the equipment itself. Generally, the methods used to... Sorry, I've not managed to break the technology. Am I back on?
I think we are, yes indeed.
Okay. Where was I? In the methods that I've seen used to evaluate the cost of technology, whether to move from manual to automated, to move from one automated system to Ultra or vice versa, they've all been flawed. So one of the subjects I wanted to tackle today is how to compare and evaluate cost effectiveness of automated systems. Technology solutions on the market all have different pricing models, and some are superior than others in many respects. This makes the comparison exceptionally hard. Stuart, our previous presenter, discussed the requirement for MI information to manage campaigns and personnel, but for our purposes, it also provides some data key to the cost analysis, which I'll show later. What I aim to explore is one method you can use to compare the effectiveness of any proposed solution from manual dialing to enterprise predictive dialers. It doesn't matter what you're going to use them for. This method shouldn't be used in isolation, but it is a strong indicator. I'm also very aware of results of one of our polls where only 32% of the audience actually voted for using the dialer utilization as a KPI. But dialer utilization does drive the number of sales that you make. Clearly, if you're not talking on the phone, you're not going to make that sale, you're not going to make that appointment, etc. But let's see how we can use this method to explore the differences. So the crux of the challenge is not to compare the cost of one technology against another. It's to compare the cost of the technology and its effect on our business, and particularly the effect on our most expensive resource, the sales advisors. The The first thing we need to do is have a look at the actual cost of our agent's time. So one of the figures we need, and this is where Stuart comes in, is we need to know the amount of time that we're actually talking to clients, wrapping up a call at the end of each call, and the time waiting between calls. So our general dialer performance, whether that be manual or progressive, preview, etc. All of these are going to produce the same numbers, obviously in different percentages. The next thing we need to do is actually understand what it's going to cost us to employ this agent. So we have their remuneration, their commission, their awards. They're also entitled to benefits such as their paid holidays, their pension, paternity, sick leave, all those sorts of things that we try to ignore until they happen. And then we've got our overheads as a business, their national insurance that we have to pay. We've got a management overhead, their supervisors, IT, that'd be the cost of the platform itself. The QA people who are looking after them and checking them, training them. The cost of the technology such as PCI that you might have to employ. HR, building, furniture, all of these need to be factored into the cost. Clearly you can leave them out when you're comparing one system to another, but I think it will become clear why it's important. So the figure that I came up with for an ATC contact centre using a variety of information sources was £23,000 a year per agent. I'm sure a lot of our listeners will say, well, we don't pay our agents that much, but by the time you factor in that HR, etc., that's the way it comes out. So what do we do with this figure? Well, the first thing we can do is divide it into the total paid time for our agents, roughly 260 days a year. They're not in the office each one of those days, and we end up with a figure here of a cost per hour of £12.25. I don't actually find this chart particularly useful. It can be interesting, but the reason I don't find it useful is an awful lot of it we don't have any control over. The paid holidays, the lunch, the bank holidays. So a figure. The reason I presented this figure is to show how I derived the figure that we really do need.
And if anyone wants to see that chart, if they go into the chat room, callcenterhelper.com/chat, they can get that from the download slides one if anyone came in late and was trying to scribble the details down.
Excellent. Well, of course your costs may change from one call center to the next, but that's a rough indication of how to work it out. So the figure we really do need is the cost per productive agent hour. So this is the time they're actually sat in front of their PC and their phone, ready or actually doing work for us. And it doesn't matter how that talk and wrap and wait time is separated. That's our next subject. I'm sure if I'd started off this part with £17.16 an hour, there would have been a few surprises. Mm-hmm. Having got this figure, and we're going to use it as a datum throughout the comparison test, I've done exactly the same comparison test on our secondary system we're going to have a look at, and we can see that the cost per telephone hour is lower. That could be because the technology is lower. It's certainly not going to be because the agents cost me less suddenly because I changed technology, or I've got a smaller building. The reason in this case happens to be because we've assumed our new platform is going to save us 10 minutes per agent hour a day of getting them to be logging into the platform more often. That could be because the IT of the two technologies, the revised technology allows us better management of the agents so that we can see that some time's being wasted, or if you like, a simple view is that it's just removing 10 minutes of downtime per weekday. So in this case, our actual technology is identical costs for both platforms, but we can see that a small difference in the performance of one over the other has already made quite a large difference, 47p per paid working hour to ourselves as a business. Having got these figures, this is the step where we can have a look at performance. So we've got our new platform on the right, our orange system, and we're comparing that to our green system on the left. On the orange table, the average wrap seconds per call and the wait seconds has been reduced to show that we believe that this new technology has got an improvement in performance, and hopefully we would be able to evidence that by either trials or tests or similar clients. The average talk time can be changeable for a number of technology reasons, but in this case, I've left it exactly the same across both platforms. It can change, but that would be subjective, and that's exactly what we're trying to remove from any comparison. These wait and wrap times of 15 seconds, by the way, aren't a target. They are just a very slight improvement on our green system to show what a big change this is going to have over our overall cost. Yep. So we can now come to the final step of the comparison. We've got our £17.16, our first figure. We put it into our nice little table. We've got our secondary system we put in. And we can then have a look at our proper cost analysis, which I've already revealed at the bottom, but let's see how we work it out. Remember me saying that the two systems are identical costs. So we've got our annual cost of the agent on our new system is obviously exactly the same as our old one because our technology costs the same as well. Our value of improvement, well, that's take the annual talking hours of the revised platform we're looking at minus the annual talking hours of the other system, and multiply it by that cost that was so important that we got in the first place, which was what it actually cost us to get somebody sat in front of their phone attempting to do work for us. And that comes out at £1,800, and over an ATC contact centre, that's £150,000 a year. In these examples, the two technologies costing the same have produced that £150,000 improvement in or reduction in our costs. Or potentially an improvement in our productivity. Any differences between the technology costs are dwarfed by the effect that one technology can have over another, and that is the crux of the system, that small changes in performance create disproportionate changes in the ownership costs.
Indeed. It's quite a large sum there, 150,000.
Absolutely. Even a slight change in the number of agent hours can affect that cost as well. This is an oversimplified view, but that's the best we can do in the time that's been allowed to us. But I hope that as I've shown that the efficiency of an agent's time and productivity of platform are paramount to its cost effectiveness. So I'll move on to our second subject, and that's the correct interpretations of reports. Again, we've got a limited amount of time, so what I thought I'd do is tackle this by looking at a couple of comparisons that we have from experience of the effects of looking at reports and interpreting them correctly. So Stuart highlighted the requirement to establish the best time to make calls and using this information to advantage, and I certainly believe this is true, but it may not be the whole story. So my first example is a customer service and debt management collections department, roughly 150 agents operating over multiple sites. And prior to Ultra's involvement with us, they have created a rather sophisticated algorithm to call customers at the right time based on the information they gathered in their CRM system. This system instructed the agents to pick up the phone and manually call the customers at the correct time of day, and they got good results out of it and reformed, and they're extremely happy with it. Ultra were asked to come in and try and automate this system, but as you can imagine, they were very reluctant to release control over the time of day of calling because they'd had so much success already. So all we could do at this point was remove the agent's fingers from the whole process, call the customers automatically at the right time, and remove the non-contacts and reschedule them that would normally be work done by the agents. Customers are very happy, understandably, but that's probably because, as we've seen, that a small change in the agent's productivity makes a large change in costs. But what's this got to do with the correct interpretation of reports? And I would agree with you up to now, so I'll come to the point quickly. Our customer was naturally examining the improvement in their productivity following the change, and this is why they were they're happy with the improvement in productivity. But looking at the reports, what they were missing was a major KPI that they could look at that's readily available and Ultra could assist with. They were achieving 38% talk time an hour, so 30% of an agent's logged in time they were actually talking to a client. And what we could show them from reports and other similar clients, not particularly doing similar jobs, but doing similar call flows, were achieving 70% talk time. So if we very quickly fly through our comparison from that we learnt earlier, we take our two systems, costing the same because obviously they weren't going to change from one system to another, wasn't going to cost any more, but they would be doing a lot more annual talking hours per agent annually if they modified their platform. So cost of improvements was zero, net value of improvements to per agent is £7,000 a year, 150 seat contact centre, £1 million a year. That would be the net cost of agents, or a net reduction in agent cost to achieve the same amount of work on a fully operating dialing system. So what I'm trying to show is that this highlights that the sheer speed of a good, well-managed automated dialing system will produce results that are far more significant than a contact management strategy alone, no matter how sophisticated that strategy may be. So on to my second example, a much simpler and quicker one, which is a client of ours working with an outbound sales campaign over a long period. They had a team working Monday to Friday, full-time employees, and a skeleton team on Saturday. They were looking at a report, a sales per hour report produced automatically from the system, and were using it in the right normal ways. But when they looked at a version of this report that combined the sales per hour over a number of different days, it became very clear that the productivity their Saturday team were achieving per agent was far in excess of anything achieved through the week. Now, what they did with that information after some short trials was to change their operating hours from Tuesday to Saturday. And they just ditched Monday in its entirety, and they did retrieve better results with fewer full-time employees.
And that's because they could hit more people on a Saturday who were receptive to their messages.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what I'm suggesting is that the key to interpreting reports is not necessarily reading the data correctly. It's what steps and actions you take once you've established that data. So I'll come on to our last point, and I know that I'm running slightly short of time, so call blending, we can do this fairly quickly. It's a much misunderstood and maligned technology. Ideally, inbound call centers employ agents for the peak number of calls, so the graph on the screen shows the blue line is the number of calls that arrived in a 15-minute period for a client over a given day. And the working hours. And the green is the number of agents they've got logged in and the slight up and downs for shift changes, lunch, etc. So if we look at the red areas, that's where the some calls have been dropped, or at least longer queuing because we didn't have enough agents on. And the green areas is where there's not been enough inbound calls to keep the customer busy. And the dark green areas, that's 3,700 or so minutes of unproductive agent time. Blending. Well, if we employ blending, we can skill enough agents for the trough number of calls. And now our little green areas have moved down to 450 minutes of unproductive agent time, quite a large saving per day. And the orange areas are those that would be answered by our outbound agents when there aren't enough inbound agents to cope with the number of calls queuing. In summary then, 462 agents of hours of agent time was what we're using, and we had some drop calls. And if we're using blending, we've got 411 hours of agent time, 100% SLA, and that's 11% cost saving.
So I mean, with cost savings like that, oh, you're going to come on some objections. I was just asked.
Absolutely.
What objections? What why more people aren't? Because we've got 42% of the audience aren't using any form of blending.
Absolutely. Well, those most of the objections, I think I've probably heard them all, but I'm always ears open to hear some more. The technology doesn't permit me only to skill some outbound calls for those outbound agents for those inbound calls. Well, the process is too difficult to manage. A very real one is the inbound calls can cause breach of Ofcom abandonment limits. Now that is something to be careful of. The inbound calls don't queue. The technology only allows me to blend all inbound call flows and not just selective ones. Well, all of these objections are, well, they're all technology objections. It's either the technology won't do what the customer wants, or the person is objecting about what they believe the technology is capable of. Well, I could go on for a long time on this, but I just want to bring us to a conclusion. There are substantial cost savings. We saw that. You can improve your customer service. That's very important. I'll touch on one, that it's very easy to stay with Ofcom abandonment with a good blending system, but I'd suggest that you just seek the services of a technology provider that can meet your needs and realize those benefits, because it is relatively easy.
And I'd be very interested to hear from our audience if you've had any objections to call blending. It seems there's quite a big benefit there. Just from the audience, what's been sort of holding you back? So I'd be interested to hear that. So thank you very much indeed for that, Darren. Some fascinating insight, and I think the call blending certainly fits in quite nicely. Right, we're going to pick up some. We've got time for some more tips and questions from the audience. So we'll just pop those up onto the screen. And the first tip, I find lucky dip incentives seem to work well. Stuart, I know you're a great believer in incentives. Also, when you know which days are going to be hard, get everyone hot sausage rolls, perk them up a bit. So.
Food is always good. I mean, we've done it with a 48-seater we were working on before, where we'd all come in, it was snow on the ground, and et cetera, so, you know, moods were down. So I sent the HR manager off to McDonald's for 48 breakfast, and it was a wonderful day.
Yeah. Excellent. Hot days, if you can remember what they are, hopefully we'll be having a few of those in the summer. Hot day ice cream works a treat. So you have a logistical challenge getting them all into the contact center before they know it. Sarah says, what's the best sentence to start an outbound call when trying to sell? I know Stuart and I were discussing that earlier today. I think you give some examples of ones not to use.
Yeah, I mean, to say what's the best one to use is without knowing the product, etc. That's, you know, well, some of the dark sort of thing. But there's things that you can avoid saying. I'm a big believer in not using the, you know, my name is, that kind of stuff, because what that tends to do to the recipient is it immediately makes them think sales call, so suddenly their defenses are up. You know, so I guess a nice way to look at it is to think to yourself, right, would I want to take this call? You know, would I want to call to me introduced like this? If you would, then it's a fairly safe bet that your customer would as well.
Indeed. So I think the hook is really the key. Get the audience hooked in very early. Paula says, what's the standard percentage of successful contacts versus the number of required surveys? I think this is very specific. Have you got any ballpark ideas on that, Paula, for Paula, or should we ask the audience if they?
I'll go with ask the audience.
Yeah,
that's all right, John.
You can answer that for Paula, what the percentage is. We'd be interested to see those coming through. Christopher said, are there ways to apply analytics from interaction recordings or email content in order to help prioritize and continually improve the calls?
Yes, certainly. It's analytics, obviously a wide subject, so I'm not sure if it's Christopher is talking about speech analytics or others, but it's very easy, and one of the main reports that we have on the platform is to be able to retrieve recordings based on the call outcomes and call lengths. And you can easily see differences between agents, and you know, so if you're looking for sales, you'll understand what the average length of a call is, and you can retrieve them and feed that back into the system to train other agents on this is how to make a successful call. And equally for non-successful calls, to be able to look at them and say, well, how come you couldn't turn this one as successful? Let's listen to one of our more successful agents.
Okay, we've got a few more questions here. Do we deal with non-sales oriented? I think we've covered a sort of range of different answers there. Let's pick up a few tips. Emma has said, introduce Fruity Fridays to keep agents motivated with surplus amounts of fruit on a Friday. So quite an interesting one. It's a way of getting around the classic pumping sugar into everyone.
Yes, I think with us all being so much more health conscious now, Donut Friday is, you know, fallen by the wayside, I think.
Yeah, the other danger I've seen with Donut Fridays, in one contact centre where the donuts came on, as soon as the trolley came around the corner, all the callers were put on hold to go and get a donut. They didn't have enough donuts, so that actually I think was slightly counterproductive in terms of the customer service. Russell said, try not to clutter the agent desktop solution with too much unnecessary information. This can lead to longer hold times or dead air, which means less time spent getting through the list. Certainly, I think it comes down to the point you made earlier, Stuart, that
we're going to call me simple again, are we?
Yeah. keep it simple.
Absolutely.
So we're just about at the end of the webinar so far. In one or two words, if you'd just like to put into the chat room, what did you like best about today's webinar? So if you'd like to just put that into the chat room, informative, whatever you want to put in, put that in there. Just a reminder, the slides are available on Call Center Helper. If you go to callcenterhelper.com/webinars, you'll be able to find the slides there. And if you want to share this with your management team or with your team, watch it again later, if you go onto the same address as you've logged in today, you can also find that through the webinar page. We've got a webinar series going through, so you can log into one of those and register. And just like to say thank you to our two speakers. Thank you to Stuart Pearce, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you to Darren Sullivan, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone for joining us, and we'll hopefully join you this time next week. Thanks very much, everybody, and we'll be announcing the winner of the winning tip within about half an hour or so on Twitter. Thanks, then. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye. Hey.
How was that on timing?